When I was younger, in church, I was taught that suicide was a sin, not something you gave grace to. Then I became a leader in the Army. And over my time as a leader, I've lost soldiers, none in combat, but in other ways that included suicide. What still messes with me is some of them had just come home from war. Now I'm stuck with this. I still don't agree that suicide should be an option for a person, but I've seen enough to know that it's not that simple. So the question is, what are we missing that's costing us the lives of our brothers and sisters in uniform? 4 titles, 1 truth. I'm Tommie.
And I'm Lance. This conversation is about they survived the war, but not what came after. Let's get into it.
Dr. Larry Brant, welcome to the show. But before we get into this, as a Navy chaplain who's walked with service members through some of their darkest moments, what has that experience shown you about what our people are actually carrying, especially the things we don't see as leaders or even as friends?
Thank you for the question. And again, I just want to say thank you for the privilege of being on your show. And as I think about my past 16 years as a Navy chaplain, and then 8 years before that as a chaplain for first responders, and also as a pastor in the local church, I think people hide things that they're scared of others knowing. And I think that those things, whether it's PTSD, fear-based trauma, or maybe it's moral injury where they have done something, sometimes at the direction of someone in authority over them, or maybe failed to prevent something that just eats them up with guilt and shame. I think that just builds up over time. And, you know, how we are as guys, we'll just build it up, we'll stuff it in and stuff it in and stuff it in, because God forbid we open up and become vulnerable to somebody. And at some point, it just absolutely overwhelms them.
Yeah, that hits because I've dealt with a lot, but I had one soldier, his name was Specialist Elliott. And on the outside looking in, once again, I was a first sergeant at the time, he seemed motivated, I actually saw that he had some things in him that would make him a very good leader, so I was at Campbell, we were at Campbell, and we would do ruck marches for PT, right, once a month. And he was always out there trying to talk smack to, the big dog, the first sergeant, right? And so we would have fun. That's the type of back and forth that we would have, and he'd fill in as my guide-on bearer and stuff like that. So, you build a relationship with one soldier out of the 200 plus that I had. And then I ended up, I had a change of responsibility because I got selected to go to the Sergeant's Major Academy. And while I was on my prepping myself to go to school, I get a phone call saying that, because I'd already turned the unit over, I got a phone call that a soldier had died and it was him. And it's one of those times where I was sitting there like, it doesn't make sense. The other ones that did it, I could at least see like a path. Or even the soldiers that have passed away, you could sort of see something, but that one caught me off guard. So I absolutely, I get the fact that not just men in this situation, but people try to hide weakness from other people. And that so-called weakness that they call, that can be overwhelming. So I get it. Goodness.
When a soldier dies by suicide, what's the first truth we avoid saying out loud?
The first thing I say out loud is no. All right. Because that's worst way to lose somebody, to me. You know, if you lose them in combat, it's still a shock, but you say they knew what to expect. We all knew the possibilities, and this happened, right? That's war. But when someone dies not in combat and not in a training exercise, it's like, and it ends up being suicide. It's like, first, denial, because it doesn't make sense to me as a leader. And then secondly, I start trying to figure out what we missed, right? And then not trying to, but I also immediately have to take into consideration every other soldier in the unit, right? So I can't turn into a jerk. You know, I have to still be the professional, the leader, but I do have to ask some hard questions and try to figure out, you know, what happened, what was missed. What about you, Larry?
I agree with you. You know, you've got that initial denial, but then you have to ask the question, how is this going to affect the others? Because we know that one of the contributing factors of suicide is, has a friend suicided? And so with that, you know, is there anybody this individual is especially close to that this suicide could influence them maybe in some way, shape, or form? To kind of give you an example, I mentioned this briefly when we were talking earlier, but in my very first church outside of seminary, my pastor suicided. He had been at the church for close to 20 years. He had had an injury that triggered a depression. And it was coming to the realization that this injury was going to prevent him from continuing being a pastor.
Oh,
And when he lost that identity as a pastor, then he just simply walked into a field one day and shot himself. And at that time, I was too young in the ministry to really understand how this affects other people. But yet, in the next 6 months, we had 8 people in the congregation decide, well, if he can do it, I can too. And so we had 8 attempts in the next 6 months. And I was the music and youth pastor, and we had an education pastor. And he and I had just gotten so burnt out responding to all of the fires and the emergencies within the congregation that we were literally jumping every time the phone rang, wondering if somebody had actually completed it this time.
wow. What about you?
Yeah. I'd never had to deal with a soldier or anything like that, but I think the first thing that would come to mind if something like that did happen was like, what I do? You know, what
Or didn't.
was something I didn't do? Yeah. What didn't I do? And then I think it would turn into just being that hovering, overbearing parent where you're going around and, hey, what's going on? Hey, you know, that type of overreacting, I guess.
Helicopter leader.
Yeah. I mean, but that's it's rough. I said it's hard for me to understand suicide, first of all, and then to have to if I would have had a soldier or something that taken their own life, that's heavy.
So when you lose someone, how much of it do you carry as a leader, even when you know you couldn't have stopped it? And that's where you said runs into.
I mean, I think you carry the burden big time. I mean, because you carry a lot of burden anyway. Yeah. And then when someone takes their life, then you're not just dealing with that person that just took their life, and then it's going to be family, and then it's going to be other leadership coming on you, coming looking at you, and you're like, man, am I not a good leader? What did, so you start doubting yourself.
Right.
I would think you would start doubting yourself and not losing that confidence in your leadership abilities.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, because I just feel like that suicide doesn't just affect that individual.
No.
It affects numerous people after that.
And the sad part is that's something they can't see. Yeah. What about you, Larry?
I think what I have seen is that it goes one or two ways. Like Lance was saying, you kind of place that burden upon yourself. Where have I failed? And really, we would sometimes call that a morally injurious event, where we almost think that we're taking on the fault of the suicide onto ourselves because we failed as a leader. And then the flip side to that coin is where the leader is just so callous, where I've seen them say, well, he was weak, and just move on. I've seen both of those. I think what we have to do is, sometimes people hide who they are, and they don't reveal that until it's too late. And they have, like your young man who, seemed really good gear and seemed great. I can think of one young man who was a Coast Guard reservist that I worked with, and we thought he was just great. They were the unit was getting ready to deploy, and he had been activated, and we thought everything was good. He talked the good talk, and then the day the unit got activated, he suicided. And what he had not shared with anyone in his command, we later found talking to his neighbors, was the thought of being activated and deploying again just absolutely filled him with dread and terror. But yet he just would not voice that with us so that we could have helped him. And then you just feel like, I've missed it.
Yeah, I can say. So in my career, I've had 2 suicides. One suicide on my watch. Another suicide right after I turned the company over, within a week or so. And then I had a suicide of one of my old platoon sergeants that worked for me 3 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago, killed himself. And out of all those 3, the first one I had was a brand new private from AIT, wasn't with us 60 days. So I had, the only contact I had with that soldier was introducing him to me when he first bring him to the unit. And I sit down and I talk to the soldier. And so I had no real connectivity to that soldier. But when he killed himself, I still felt like I failed the unit and I failed that soldier first. Because I should have talked to that soldier more. I should have called that soldier to my office. I should have gone up to that soldier, or I should have forced the platoon sergeant to do that. Yeah.
That's stuff that you didn't know, though.
I
mean, you couldn't have known.
And that's the facts, but it still slaps you in the head like that. And then when the soldier died that I told you about, it was the exact same way. Why didn't I just stay here a little longer? I should have at least not taken away and prepped myself for the academy. I should have still shown up every day, at least walked in and checked on the people. That was my other thought. And then the soldier, his name was Maddox, Sergeant First Class. He had deployed to Afghanistan a year and a half to 2 years before I took over the unit. And then we deployed to Afghanistan again, and he was a platoon sergeant. But he wasn't a platoon sergeant then, but he was a convoy commander. But that deployment, before we went, a lot happened there. A lot of trucks got blown up. A lot of people were evacuated. Luckily, no one had died, but there was a lot of stress and a lot of trauma from that deployment. And then, you know, for some of those soldiers to go back to Afghanistan, because at first we were in the same spot they were last time, but then in Kandahar, but then we ended up going out to Shindig, which was way west. But anyway, we were still traveling some on the roads. And me and him actually built a real relationship. Communication was good, conversation. He was a stellar platoon sergeant that tried, right? And that's all you can ask from a leader. And when we got back from deployment, I sent him to work in battalion S3 because I had to get him out of that, because 2 back-to-back deployments.
Get him out of that environment.
Absolutely. As a convoy commander is enough. And plus, you know, it's a learning step as well. So I sent him to operations, and he worked up there, and he did well. But when we would talk, he'd still, you know, he ended up getting divorced. He had a child, or had 2 children, I believe. Ended up getting a divorce. We lived in the same area for a while. And so I felt that I had to listen to him. You know, I felt that I, even as not his current leader, I felt if he called, or I should call and check on him. And that's what we did. And then when he went to battalion, he was working with a battle buddy of mine, someone that I was first sergeant with and trusted him completely. And so I knew he was picking up the attention as well, because that's the type of leader he is. And so when I left the academy and went and did things as a sergeant major, it was less communication, but every once in a while on Facebook or stuff, we'd reach out and whatever. But when I would hear from him most after I became a sergeant major, it was always, he was alcohol. He had alcohol on him, and he would call, and the first thing he'd say, man, hey, I love and respect you. He said, because, you know, you are the most consistent leader I've ever been with, right? Because he would always say that, yeah, I joke around, but everybody knew there was a limit to my joking around. And they knew that right behind that was, all right, let's get back to being soldiers, you know. And so he always talked about how I respected that. And that's how he always started the conversation. And then he'd start talking about, you know, some of his trauma. And all I could do is just listen, you know, what we're taught, assist specifically. All you can do is listen, try to get them comfortable and calm, and then reach out to people, right? Basically, try to connect them with somebody else so they can continue the conversation, because you cannot continue that conversation forever, you know, because you're limited as a leader. And then after that, it was like I hadn't heard from him like in a year and a half, and then I got a message that he killed himself. And I'm just like, it's one of those where it was all about combat and trauma that was interfering with his life back home that he just could not get over. And the fact that I couldn't help him get over that, you just start to beat yourself up.
Say, do you feel like you were what you call the person, the Grim Reaper with folks? Because when you start having...
You feel like you're the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, you feel like you're the problem. It takes a lot. And I know the chaplain knows this, Larry knows this, that it's one thing to be able to deal with all that stuff, but usually the leaders and the chaplains are the ones that don't deal with it afterwards. You know, I specifically, I deal with the moment, deal with the stress of the situation, But immediately I have to start thinking about the rest of the soldiers, making sure they know that that's not the right way to handle things, making sure they know mental health and chaplains are available.
People are there.
And then right after that, it's family. You get attacked by family because they don't understand. Some of them don't want to understand. And you have to respect that. And you have to still be professional. And family can say some of the harshest things to you. And then right after that, you have to plan the memorial. And all while you're doing this, you're forced to brief your higher headquarters. You're forced to brief the base commander. You're forced to, basically take responsibility for it and then show them what you did to prevent it and then what you will do to prevent it. And it's so much stress after that happens.
That's how I would think it'll put you into a defensive
100%
mode, because it's like, okay, we had our training.
Yeah.
Did everybody get their training? Did that soldier get their training during that time? Because you feel like they're
and
out
nobody
as a
believes
got you.
you.
Yeah,
Nobody
like
in your higher command
you.
believes you until they see their name on a piece of paper.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's real like that. So
yep. From what you've seen, does suicide come from one breaking point, or is it something building over time that we just don't recognize?
It's been my experience that it's something that builds over time. I think the idea of one breaking point, quite frankly, is just a myth. I think that breaking point just may have been the straw that broke the camel's back of things that just build over time and just layer upon layer upon layer that just slowly changes the person's mindset to where it takes away their will to live, or as we have talked about, sometimes they even come to the point where they believe it's to everybody's benefit, that everybody else's life will be better off if they're removed from the situation, where they feel like they are such a burden to their friends, their family, even to the mission of the unit, that it's better off if they're gone.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I just add one more. Sometimes, which was the case that I was talking about, they do it to prove a point because it was a relationship situation. And matter of fact, both of the private and the specialist, both of them had to deal with a relationship, and only one of them had a kid. And going back to the private, I talked about, it came straight from advanced individual training. He had a daughter, and the conversation that we were able to find once the investigation was done, they were able to get into his Facebook account, and there was a conversation between him and a friend where he was just saying exactly what you were saying. I think it'll be better for my family and my daughter, and then try to make it sound like, well, then they'll get this money and they'll be in a better situation. And it seems like the only problem in the family is me. And that was his excuse, so, but I agree 100%. I just add that one, that sometimes it's almost like a dare to somebody, to where they'll say it, maybe not being super serious, and then they get challenged by that person. Next thing you know, they mess around and did something like that. But in every case that I've had to deal with, I think that there's always signs, but there's levels to finding those signs, right? If you're not in their everyday life, you're not going to see those signs. Like that Facebook post, that nobody knew him well enough yet to be Facebook friends with him. Like I said, he was still 60 days under.
Right.
So nobody's going to capture that. And the worst part is that private was going to mental health. He had a mental health appointment that day, And he talked to that woman, right? And the woman gave whatever response she gave, but he told her that he was feeling a certain kind of way. And instead of sending him back to the unit, she sent him directly home. And when he went home, that's when that happened. Yeah, so we didn't even get a chance. Like behavioral health at that time didn't even call us to let us know that they had that conversation and to follow up with the soldier because he had went home. So there's so much to it. But, yeah, there's always one thing I've learned through my own mental health adventure and my own treatment and then my own maturity is that the only way you could possibly know that someone's going to kill themselves is if they tell you. That's the only way you could possibly know. Because any other time from that, you're just guessing and hoping that they're not, telling it, not going to actually go through it.
So I got this question for y'all.
Agree.
So I agree with you that it has to be something that builds up over time to get to the point where you actually go through with the deed.
Right.
So, like I said, my experience from seeing with it and dealing with it and talking to folks that done is being in an emergency room where we have young, 18-year-old privates,
basic training.
Yeah, basic training guys that come in and do it. And it's like, okay, was this something that was building up over time and they slipped through the cracks to get in, or is it an attention-seeking act where they're
ideation instead of actual?
Because there was either they taking an overdose or of Tylenol or Motrin, or we had one that actually had their belt around their thing that almost went through it. He tried to hang himself off the bunk bed.
Yeah, that's and even like I was a drill sergeant for 3 years, and we've had soldiers come up with those ideations. Never had anybody kill themselves or actually attempt to kill themselves, but definitely ideations. And the same thing when we was in combat, we had soldiers with ideations. But when we're talking about training environment, it's just one of those things where and that's another factor you got to throw in there. Are you trying to bring attention to yourself? Are you trying to build an excuse of why you can't do something? Or are you just trying to get separated from the military? Or the worst case is, are you actually feeling that way and trying to hurt yourself? And it's, as a leader, you just have to, I just realized that all I had to do, or all I could do, is re-emphasize monthly counseling, re-emphasize talking about the desire for people to want to hurt or kill themselves. Talk to them and try to make them realize that is not an answer. It's not a legitimate answer, because the only person that's getting reprieve in this scenario is you. You know what I'm saying? Yes, you're ending everything that happens, but you're causing so much trauma to the people around you at way different levels, and just trying to get those messages out, and then also trying not to be inconsistent with that message. Because as you know, it's easy to stand in front of formation and chew people out for something and then don't talk about it again for 6 months. So it's something you have to add to your conversation. So we added it to safety briefings.
So we've got training briefings, resources, all of those things.
Right.
But we've seen soldiers go to mental health, get sent home, and still lose their life.
Yeah.
What are we missing?
Now, the professional leader in me, the 30-year sergeant major, it says that squad leaders have to be on top of them, right? As a squad leader, you have to be engaged, and and that's that fine line that I explain, especially to some of my leaders. As a squad leader, you have to almost feel like a friend, and trustworthy, but you still have to teach, mentor, and develop, right? And you can't confuse that line. So you have to ask those hard questions to those soldiers, like, how are you feeling today? And you have to learn their moods. Mm-hmm. You have to figure out, or you have to be able to tell when they're feeling off. And then you have to have the fortitude and the courage to address it then. And then when you have those simple conversations, you have to put it on paper so that you can identify that you're having these conversations and it's something you can refer back to.
Right.
But you have to walk that line because you don't want to at the same time make the soldier feel like they're getting in trouble for feeling different. So right. that would be my first response as a leader, is the squad leaders have to get into their soldiers. Okay. I mean, to the point to where you know your soldiers almost as well as you know yourself. And that's an impossible ask, but the effort of that has to happen.
I mean, and Larry would probably be better to answer this too, because I'm trying to think, like, whenever I was when I was in, and we would have, you have your training, your annual training stuff. Was it ever anything like that specific for leaders? Because I remember the suicide training that we had for everybody that you had to go through, but is it something that's, specific that they, that for your higher tier leaders, your mid-level leaders,
on how to deal with it?
How to recognize what to recognize, and how
that's what assist is. And there are all kinds of different programs. I don't remember what I don't the breakdown of assist is right now, but
please let us know.
Yeah, I'll pass it off. But there are tools that the military has, and they're not just classes just for subordinates. There's classes for everybody that they have to get through, and then your chaplain as a command.
I mean, because is that?
Yeah, they're all mandatory. Absolutely.
I don't remember ever having.
Oh, really? Yeah. I'll defer to you.
I'm trying to think one, but I don't remember getting one like that.
Well, as I think about the situation that I'm in right now, everybody has the general military training on suicide that has to be done annually. And sadly, I think it's become more of a CYA for the institution. Past that, other than I do know in some of the leadership courses, they will do that. I completely agree with you. It's about leadership becoming more intrusive.
Yes.
And getting to know their people as people. And getting to know the story of their people so that when they're off, they see it.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that's going to be the number one thing that deters anything. I know right now the Marine Corps is taking a very, very hard look at suicide because we've got all of these things and yet the needle's not moving. And there's frustration. Why is the needle not moving? Is it because they're looking at it more as a check in the box, or is it something else? I know with what we do, for instance, I think Safe Talk, which is one of the tools that's used, Safe Talk is not only good at raising suicide alertness, it's an excellent leadership tool on how to get to know your people as people. And then Assist is an excellent tool on the nuts and bolts of how to actually do a suicide intervention. Because we all know the situation where someone expresses that they may have suicide ideation, and then it almost seems like somebody grabs them by the collar and drags them kicking and screaming to medical. And everybody else in the unit sees that, and they're like, ain't no way in hell I'm going to say anything, because they're afraid of that very thing happening to them. But yet, if the leadership and the chaplain and the medical, if someone expresses suicide ideation, there's an actual conversation that happens. What's your story that got you up to this point? And then the person actually becomes a part of their own treatment,
Yeah,
if you want to use that term.
absolutely.
Yep.
And the other service members see, oh, he actually got help when he asked for it, versus being drug off to medical so quick their feet didn't even touch the ground.
It's easy to get a soldier sent away for 30 days. It's easy.
Yeah, and I remember when we came in, the psychiatrist and the psychologist were called wizards. Remember that?
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I heard that term, and someone said, "Well, I'm a psychologist." "Oh, you're a wizard." And I said, why do you call them a wizard? Because if you have any mental health issues, they'll make you disappear.
I'll just add that even though I talked about stressing that the first line supervisor is the one that should get to know that soldier and all that, I'll go back to, I still remember the first time that I can remember hearing the news and people talk about suicide like it wasn't the devil, like it wasn't a sin, was when Robin Williams died, or when he took his life. I remember that the fallout was everybody was sort of like talking over the fact that he killed himself, but they were giving him his flowers, and it was presented that way, to where it was more talk about how great he was as comedy, and how good of an actor he was, and the movies he's done and what he's done in his life. That was the first time that I remember the temperature changing on suicide.
Well, not being demonized.
Yeah, so I remember, because I was a senior leader, I remember at that time worrying that could open up more suicide attempts, because I believe that there are some people that want to commit suicide, but they don't do it because of fear of how they'll be seen or how their family be treated. So that I felt was one way of that some people may not pull the, not to say pull the trigger, but may not continue to commit suicide. But I just think that when we as a society stopped basically judging people for committing suicide, I think that opened the door to let people know that it's okay, it's all right.
I think we started looking for the problem, or the solution to the problem, or the why folks are doing it. Start looking more into that, and not just putting people from the, like, oh, they were weak, they weren't strong, they it's a good thing they are gone, that's another person. Instead of looking at it like that, start looking at it like, okay, what was going on in this person's life? Why did they start doing this? Then being able to see some of those signs so that you could help. Yeah.
And I think it was, I agree with you, but I also think it was people just got sick of tearing people down. When someone dies, I think people started to realize their family's still here. Their loved ones still here, whether they're public or private. You don't want to hear people just trashing someone and forgetting the fact that they were a loving father or a loving mother, or a soldier or military service member that you could rely on and who was outstanding while they were there doing their job. So it's just one of those things to where, just like the evolution of society all over, I think finally people started to think that let's stop demonizing these people and let's just talk about their lives, because their family doesn't deserve that. And I understand that, but I also am worried that the more you see things, the more likely it feels like it's an option. Now, I'm going to be honest. I've struggled to understand suicide because I've never seen it as an option for myself. So how do we reconcile that with people who truly feel like they don't have other options? And we'll start with you, Larry.
Well, first of all, I think we need to be honest with ourselves. So many times we don't recognize how we feel about suicide until we've already put that out there. And here's what I mean by that is we aren't self-aware enough to realize we're broadcasting that if you're considering suicide, I can't relate to you because that's something that I've never thought about.
Yeah, I would never do. Yep.
And so then what might happen is someone who needs help may never want to come to you because unintentionally you've been putting out those signals that I can't understand or talk to you. And I'm not talking about you personally, Tommie. Okay? And so that's something in Assist we talk about is you need to know what you need to come to grips with how you feel about it because you're entitled to your own opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You're entitled to how you feel about it. But you do have to be careful how you broadcast it. And so are you broadcasting it to where you're actually preventing people from coming to you to get help? Or are you realizing how you feel about it, but you're still intentionally being open to others whose life just may be a train wreck from the word go, and they're getting to the point where they feel like this is their only option, or
right.
they're a burden. And so, because I know I come from that perspective where it's not something that I would ever consider. But after I saw my pastor's suicide, I realized that there could come a point when even I might consider it if enough things go wrong in my life.
You're 100% right.
And once I realized that helped me to put out less roadblocks and be more open to, hey, I might not be where you are, but I'm willing to listen to where you are. And as a chaplain, very rarely does somebody ever come up to my door and go, hey, sir, I'm thinking about suicide today. Normally it's the leadership, like the two of you were, who would call me and say, hey, can you talk to this Marine? Can you talk to this sailor? Can you talk to this soldier, Coast Guardsman, airman? And then we would sit down and have a conversation. But one thing that I have noticed, like we had talked about, because so many things build up over time, what I have seen is that very rarely do they ever talk it all out.
Yeah.
Even with the mental health professional, because the mental health professional still has an obligation. If they say something in that conversation that is suicidal or homicidal, that person has to report it. They're a mandatory reporter. Now, a federal military chaplain is not. We are not mandatory reporters. Matter of fact, we are guaranteed by the UCMJ to not report. We get in trouble if we do, because we break that confidentiality, and the military sets up that confidentiality so this individual knows that there is one place they can go where no matter what they say, it's not going to follow them back to their unit.
Not going to be a career killer.
It's not going to be, it's not going to be that silver bullet that kills their career. Although, quite frankly, having suicide ideations in almost every category will not kill your career. But one thing that I have noticed in my decades of ministry is that when you sit down and let the person share and you don't judge them, you don't try to fix them, you don't tell them how to fix the situation, but you just simply listen. I'll be honest with you, about 80% of the time they talk themselves out of it because they have never actually said it all out loud before. And then when they do, they'll sit back and go, "Phew, I feel better. I've never actually said that out loud before. And maybe things aren't as bad as what I was initially thinking." Now, you still have the other 20% that are, but by and large, in my career, it's been 80% of those who, once they start talking, they literally talk themselves out of it.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, as an alpha leaning forward, it's hard to sit back and listen, because I may be able to get through the first couple, whatever, but then there's a point where, and especially if you're that first line supervisor, you're not mature enough, so it's a trait that you have to be able to do that. And that's why assist is so great, because it is a step by step. Yeah.
It's a skill.
But I know the soldiers that I have dealt with as a squad leader or as a platoon sergeant that were having some type of mental health moment, I know that I was listening to find the problem and then trying to help coach them to get to that. But sometimes there's 8 problems, and I just heard that first one, and you're just sitting there. Mm-hmm. And so another thing that I had to do, especially as a first sergeant and sergeant major, I just had to understand that when a soldier comes to me, especially one that doesn't have a natural path to my door, meaning they're not directly under me, right? Or like my number 2 or something like that. That's when I need to just shut up and just let the soldier just talk, because I always felt that if they came to me, it's either because they didn't trust somebody in their chain of command, or somebody has failed them and didn't let them get their story out. Now, even if that's true or not, that's just how I took it. So when they would knock on my door and come in, I'd tell them to sit down and just say, let's just talk. And I did have one soldier specifically that in that conversation did exactly what you said. He basically worked it out himself, and then all I had to do was sit there and say, and I'll just talk about it without putting the names out, but a soldier of mine, his daughter was raped, and she's on the spectrum. And so at Joker, it was only 2 actions. It was either suicide or homicide. And so trying to listen to this story, and then trying to be, and I had to tell him, I'm like, look, I'm taking this off, right? I'm talking to you as a man and as a father. I understand all of that. I understand your guilt. I understand that, because if something happened to my son, I'd be in the same rage you are. I said, but I somehow was put in this situation to let you know that if you do A, then your daughter will be alone the rest of her life. And then your wife will be there having that struggle and deal with that, and hopefully help her to become better. I said, if you do B, then your daughter will have to handle that by herself, and then your wife will have to deal with blah, blah, blah. And I was just trying to make him see, without over talking, that just these 2 actions that you want to take, leave your daughter by herself and leave your wife there to deal with it. He made it through and still made it on to retire, and the family still together. So that was a short win for me, a small win.
I'd say that was a huge.
Yes. But the only reason I say it like that is because the other soldiers, I didn't either get an opportunity to do that, or I wasn't wise enough to establish a situation there where I did that. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not taking all that weight on me, but there was a leadership challenge that I failed when a soldier dies in my unit. It's just how much of that is truly on my shoulders versus how much is it, the reality of it is I couldn't have done anything to prevent it. So that's the balance that I use that tries to somehow make reason and make it make sense so that I don't get so caught up in thinking that I could save everybody, so.
Yeah. And chaplains get caught up like that too, because, you'll have the leadership and they'll say, fix this Marine, chaps, and, and we want to be the fix it guys. And, like you were saying, but sometimes what we need to do is shut up and listen.
And that's the thing, like every chaplain that I worked with, and I was in a command situation, I asked them to come to the office once a week just to stop by, just to let us know if there's something they see, or we could let them know something that we see. And I can tell you, every chaplain I work with, they just seem to naturally have that selfless service in front of them, and they were able to, if nothing else, I knew for a fact that they could talk to my soldiers easier than I could. Mm-hmm. And that was something that I welcomed. And in these situations, the chaplains didn't even have an opportunity to really get involved because the soldiers kept it to themselves. So it's just crazy like that.
That's what both you guys are saying. I think it's important not only in a military setting, but in just a regular civilian setting, that folks around you know that you're approachable, that you just want to hit, you're available to listen, without judging. Yeah. And that's probably I'd say one of the biggest things, especially for men, is knowing that they have a safe spot to land, where they're not going to get clowned on, by having feelings.
Yeah, and I don't even think nowadays, I don't think it's the clowning part. I think it's the fear of stopping them on the path that they think they're on, right? So I think that some of the soldiers don't say the truth because they think that'll affect their potential or their ability to be successful however long they're in the military. And so that's where they stop talking about it or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to what I said, is just you have to somehow make it a normal conversation. And you have to make it something. If you're at the top, you have to make sure that the lowest level of leadership understands that this is how you need to be. And then you have to basically hope that they get that message to their soldiers, because no matter what you do, especially when you're talking E9 and 06 level, the private, you're not going to be able to capture every private's emotions and moods. And that's something that you have to understand, and the only reason I can talk about this is because I've been in the mud of dealing with the suicides, and I've spent years blaming myself, and it took me a minute to figure out that I can admit that there was some fault there. I didn't do enough, but at the same time, I don't know what enough looked like, even now, that I could have saved, this soldier or made the conditions better so that at least we could maybe capture it before.
And understanding that you're never going to be the perfect leader.
Exactly. Yep. And that's a hard thing to slap in your forehead.
Larry, I don't know what you're talking about right there.
That is hard.
So I'll be honest. I haven't experienced this the same way Tommie has. But listening to this, and even thinking about what we've talked about, it makes me realize how much we don't see, even when we think we're paying attention. And I think that's the part that doesn't sit right, that someone can be right there in the formation, in the room, in our lives, and still feel like they've got no way out. So for me, the conversation isn't about having the answers. It's about realizing we've got to do better at paying attention and not assuming we know what someone is carrying.
Dr. Larry Brant, Chaplain Larry Brant, we appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with us. This is one we've been wanting to have for a long time, but we had to wait until we found the right person. And thankfully, you were the right person. So good luck in all of your future endeavors. And the main thing I want to say to you is thank you for being able to join the conversation.
Thanks,
that's something that we really appreciate.
Well, thank you, guys. I really do appreciate it. This is something near and dear to my heart with everything that I've experienced over years of ministry and years of life as well. If anyone is interested, I released a book in February on moral injury called Restoring the Broken. The website is www.restoring-the-broken.com. The audiobook is available on Amazon and Audible. Or if you have any questions you just want to ask me, feel free to email me at chapsbrant, CHAPSBRANT, @yahoo.com. I don't mind you doing that at all. And it's been an honor to be here with Tommie and Lance. Thank you guys so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Larry. All right, y'all, until next time, let's keep the conversation going.